Hey Aishwarya, welcome to Caapid Simplified. This
Hey, how's it
is Nourah and Karthik, and I know you know Nourah a long time before. But
going?
of course, the many people who are going to watch this video after this do not know who you are. So maybe let's
Okay,
start by getting to know who you are and why you're here in
awesome.
the first place.
Well, my name is Aishwarya Subramanian. I'm a dentist. I grew up in the Middle East. I went to dental school in India, in Chennai. And once I was done with dental school, I had to make an elective decision to go back to Dubai or to move to another country. And after much research, I kind of figured that US was a more like a safer bet for me in terms of like stability once I invest the money in my education. So yeah, I mean, I moved here, went to UCLA, graduated from UCLA. I'm a COVID grad, so that was great. Didn't have a graduation. It was kind of sad. Hopefully, we'll have one next year. And then now I'm doing GPR, which is basically general practice dentistry. And you have like two branches in that. You can either be clinical based, which is more like focused on just how you would work in a private practice, like AGD. And there's also the other kind, which is like hospital based, which is like more medicine oriented, which is what I'm kind of trying to do. So that's where we're at.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. So I spoke to Aishwarya when I was in the process, and she was one of the very few people who encouraged me rather than just like, oh, this is not going to happen. So that's a connection I made way back when I was in my first cycle. So I'm glad that I kept in touch with her, and now we have her on call. Today, the call is mostly going to be about UCLA, the school that Aishwarya has been to, and we have a couple of questions that we want to ask her, and you guys can listen to the answers from the grad herself. So the first question we have for you is, I know it's been a long time, but can you describe your interview experience at UCLA?
Yeah, sure. Like I didn't interview a lot of schools, so I think I have a very and like if you're going through this process, every interview you have a vivid memory of it because every interview is like it's
Milestone.
almost like getting into the program makes you as happy
Yeah.
as getting into the program. So it's like it's hard to forget. But UCLA was I think relatively, I interviewed at three places. I interviewed Colorado, Pittsburgh, and UCLA. And I felt like in terms of difficulty of the bench exam, I think UCLA was probably a piece of cake. Um, but that being said, when I was an interviewee with all that anxiety and that all the fun emotions that come with doing this interview because it's so high stakes, like there's so many like things that you could go wrong because you're anxious and like and if you're an overthinker like me, you will think of all the horrible things that could happen. But because of that, it seemed a lot harder. But in general, like the bench test is relatively simple. There is no mannequin, so it's like
Mm-hmm.
literally bench test that's on bench top, which is fantastic. I remember having to do like, I don't know, class two and a crown prep, but I think it's changed since. I think the last year it was more about like, there was like an OSCE, which was very
Mm-hmm.
impromptu, which was a surprise apparently, which didn't happen to me, but it was. And they had to like draw RPD designs and say what was wrong. I mean, you could say what's wrong with the prep, but it's like, where I went to dental school in Chennai, like we never did RPDs. And so if you tell me to draw an RPD design before I went to UCLA, I would look at you like you're crazy. And so if I had to deal with that, that would have been very hard for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I think people fared okay in terms of that. I think it didn't have much of a weightage. It was more like, hey, I'm going to surprise you. Let's see if you can do your best. I don't think it was more about who was right or wrong or who did better than the other. But yeah, and then there's also an exam that is, I want to say, based on step two.
Mm-hmm.
Um, don't take my advice. I didn't study for the exam. I just went for it, and I thought it was pretty okay.
Mm-hmm.
Just based off the knowledge of other Indians who went to dental schools in India, or like any Asian country for that matter. I think our theoretical knowledge is very strong, whether we like to admit it or not. And our practical knowledge is so, whether we like to admit it or not. It's just why we're here right now. And so I think if you went to an Asian country for dental school, I think in general, even when I spoke to other classmates of mine who were from Asian countries, they found that exam relatively simple. just because of the fact that our theory knowledge is pretty like strong. So if you want to study for that exam, yes, like you should. I just wasn't in a position where I could study for that exam, and I was like exhausted. So that is there. And then the interview process, I feel like in UCLA, the interview process has the most amount of weightage. Like in terms of other schools, each school has its own concept of how much weight they want to give for each thing. And so UCLA, I feel like in general has a very strong weightage on interviews. They kind of suss out your personality. They invite 50, I want to say 48 to 50 people, and they almost choose like 50% or 40% of that, right? Because it's like 20 people who get in out of 50. So they kind of pretty much have already decided if you are getting in or not. They kind of know who they want already. It's not, they're not really trying to figure out at the interview like other schools where they invite 400 people and they pick like 5 people, right? So they've kind of like already narrowed you down to say, you know what, this person is like 80% in. So all you need to do is just be who you were in your application. Like if your application says something about you and you're a whole different person and it doesn't match, I think that's a fundamental problem, because a lot of people get other people to write their essays and talk about things that they're not really passionate about. And these are educators that have been in an academic setting and have seen a million people, interviewed thousands and thousands of students. So if you're going to lie, they're going to catch you, even though you might be really good at it. So I think it very much boils down to if your personality works for that program. I think in general, what I've noticed is they kind of see if your personality is going to be a good match for that program for the traditional students, because you get integrated pretty well with them. It's unlike some schools where, like, you know, the PPIDs or advanced standing students are separate and the traditionals are separate. You kind of get integrated with them fully. So it's hard to get someone in who might not have that personality of being friendly. So I think they look at your personality a lot. So if you do or don't get into UCLA, it's basically based on the fact that if you would be happy and if you would be a good fit for UCLA. It's not about how good or bad you are. Once you're invited for the interview, you are good. There's no two ways about it. You shouldn't doubt yourself. But like, whether you're getting to that program or not is not because if you're good or not, it's because if that program is good for you. Because if you're going to get into a program that's not good for you, you're going to be unhappy the whole time. And if you're going to get in with peers who don't match your personality, you're going to be unhappy the whole time. So it's not about if you're good or not. I think like if you're here and you are at the interview, you're already really, really good at what you do. So I think that's my take on it.
That's awesome. That's actually pretty awesome. If you said like you should go to the program if you think it's the right fit for you, correct? Who do you think will vibe well with UCLA or would assume that they fit well with UCLA as a school?
You know what's funny? Actually, when I came and interviewed at Pittsburgh, I thought Pittsburgh was the best fit for me. Like when I came to University of Pittsburgh, I was like, you know what? Oh man, this program, like I feel so at home here. I feel like this is where I need to go. But you don't know. You're there for a day. How do you know if it's a good fit for you or not? Some people are very intuitive. I'm probably not. Like I know I spoke to this one girl who told me that when she interviewed at UCLA, she walked in and she knew this was it. Like she knew this was the program she was going to and she got in and it was perfect. But you're there for a day or two sometimes, right? And these people have been there their entire lives sometimes, or like for many years at least. So they know if you are going to be a good fit for the program more so than you know if that program is a good fit for you. I'm sure maybe if I got into UPitt, like it would have been a great fit for me, but maybe not. I don't know. But, you know, I think at UCLA, it's like very fundamental. Like there was this professor called Dr. Stevenson. He's quite famous. And he used to be a professor at UCLA. And so when I met with him for like somebody, I was buying his like instruments before the exam, bench test or something. And like, I remember his wife telling me, he's like, she's not even a dentist. But she sees so many students go through this bench test and she's like, I know exactly when I meet someone if they're going to get into the program or not. And the night before my interview, she's like, oh, you're going to get in. And I was like, what are you saying? She's like, no, you're going to get into the program. She's like, I know when I meet people and there's a certain personality trait that they look for and you've got it and you're going to get in for sure. So that's where I kind of gathered where this personality thing is. So maybe it's wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But this is just my
So
assumption.
let's like turn the tables now. So we asked about like what the school is looking for. So for example, I'm an applicant and I'm looking for a school. Why would I want to choose UCLA? Like, is UCLA clinically focused, research focused? You know what we look for? We look for like, how much is the school going to cost? Or is the school clinically focused? Because maybe I want to get more clinical experience, things like that. So what is it about UCLA that would make a student want to apply to that school?
So UCLA, as you may know, is very research heavy also. Because there's all these like big researches that happen at UCLA, and that's why they're like basically that's what they're known for in any field, whether it be engineering or medicine or whatever. But I think I have no interest in research really. Like I was always told and discouraged, like Nourah said, by multiple people that because I have no research background, that it makes me a not very strong applicant, right? And that is quite discouraging because I don't believe in wanting to do things because it needs to be done versus if I want to do it. Like it kind of defeats the purpose of why you're doing something, right? If you don't like it or you're not excited about it, why would you do it? And for me, dentistry, I like the clinical aspect of dentistry. I like the theoretical aspect of dentistry. I like the service aspect of dentistry. So for me, my application is most focused towards service and clinical dentistry. But I know a lot of people like doing a little bit of everything, which is fine. So like, yeah, UCLA has like a great number of researches that you can get involved in to do. There are research days that you can, participate in. And then there are like, there you have mentors who will help you go and present in conferences. People do it all the time. Maybe it might be a little bit harder with the PPID, like the advanced standing program, because it's a pretty heavy program. So I've noticed that it's more common with people who want to apply for residencies. So if UCLA is a great school if you want to apply for residencies because it has a name to it. And so when you say you're from UCLA, there's like an immediate eyebrow lift. So it kind of helps in terms of applicant like acceptance for residency programs. I think there's high acceptance rate if you're from UCLA. So that would be one of the reasons why you should pick UCLA. If you have residency in your future, this would be a great fit for you. Research, yeah, there's tons of research opportunities if that's something that you're into. Clinical wise, I mean, it was hard for me to really say if UCLA is clinically strong, but I'm starting to gather more information, like because I'm at a residency program and I have friends who are from, Texas and from Pitt and from Howard and like from other schools. So you kind of understand what they get in terms of research, in terms of clinical experience. So I feel like UCLA is right bang in the middle. Like schools like in Texas, like one of these OS residents that I have, like she did like 30, 40 crowns, which is like a whole lot in the dental school, which is a whole lot to do. Yeah, you will do a lot of crown preps when you go to like community rotations and things like that, but you don't really finish the case. But start to finish, the requirements were that much. At UCLA, there's like a moderate amount of requirements, and then I see other schools like Howard and Pitt, which is some of my other co-residents are from, where they do 1 crown. So but they're like heavy on other things. Like in Pitt, they have a heavy anesthesiology program, right? So they get a lot of anesthesiology experience, a lot of like special needs care experience, which I didn't get at all. I got no special needs, nothing. But they have very low pros experience, and I like pros a lot. So I got a lot of pros experience, and I have a lot like. Pros is very big in UCLA, and all the professors are extremely good at what they do in terms of pros. So I learned a whole lot in pros. So I think it kind of depends on what you're interested in. Endo, if you like endo a lot, like they have a great endo program. I know a lot of people who enjoy endo. When in fact, when I talk to some of my other co-residents, they have classmates who, like everybody hates endo because they have a very poor endo program. So then I think it kind of boils down to what you like and what you don't like, and what you want out of it. But I feel like UCLA on that front is like bang in the middle in terms of if you want a generalized clinical experience, it's like right in the middle. It's not towards the lower end of the spectrum, neither is it like a whole lot. It depends.
Yeah, so it sounds like you get to do a little bit of everything, but you get it in moderation. So
yeah, pretty much, yeah.
That's pretty nice. Do you have any other?
Yeah, just to like maybe relax for a bit. And while you were at UCLA in your program, outside of the very difficult clinical program and outside of the very
It's not
intense
a
house
very
parties.
difficult clinical program.
Oh, it wasn't? Okay.
I don't think anything is so difficult in dentistry. I think it's just all the extra added pressure that comes with it. Like, I think dental programs are fine. You're not doing like 20-hour shifts and stuff. You go at 8 o'clock in the morning, you're done at 5. So it's not that bad.
Yeah, speaking from the emergency department, definitely it's different. Well, outside the classroom and the clinic, and outside intense house parties, what else did you do at UCLA? What were you like involved in?
Intense house parties, is that what you said?
Yes.
Yeah, there were a lot of intense house parties. I mean, like, you can do a little bit of everything. There's like beaches. There's so much to do in LA. It kind of depends on what you want to do. If you're like into outdoor activities, there's a whole lot to do. If you're into like, watching movies, and like the Fox movies theater is right in the UCLA campus. So there's a lot of premieres, like all these famous people come. One day I was walking home and there was this random woman who walked in front of me. He was like, hey, I kind of know this lady. And I was like, wait, that's Emma Stone. And I was like, whoa. Like, things like that could happen to you. So it's like, I guess, entertaining. Food is nice. It's a lovely place to live in. LA is always great. It's like.
Were you also involved in any community service as part of the school?
Yeah, you will get involved in community service as much as you want to. You have elective points that you have to make, and for which you have to sign up for community programs and things like that. So it all depends on like how much and what you want to get involved in. So if you want to get involved in a whole lot of community health things, yeah, there is a whole lot to do in that front. If that's not your forte, then there's other things to do. If you like special needs, there's like random special need camps that you can do. So there are like a little bit of everything that you can do outside dentistry if you want to. But again, community programs are also dental focused. You're not really doing anything outside that if you want to go through UCLA.
You said like, so in UCLA, they integrate the international students with the traditional students, right? So that's what they do at SIU. And I've seen specific challenges that international students face when they are integrated with traditional students in terms of the technique they use, in terms of, certain things that they're efficient at. I know that international...
When you say technique they use, can you elaborate a little bit more?
In terms of technique, maybe technique is not the right word. It's just, the flow of things, I would say. Like when you get into clinic, they've been there for maybe 2 years before you got into school with them, and they know how it flows, right? So they're like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get the patient in. I'm going to do these things. So there's a lot of transition involved in learning how that goes. So how do you think, do you think that's very difficult to get used to? And how do you think is the interaction of an international student with a traditional student if they're integrated?
So they don't like throw you in right away. Like you have a 3-month program where it's called boot camp. Basically, it's like horrible. Those are probably the harder months of this program because you're like basically there in the morning and you don't leave until like 9, 10 at night. So it is very intense and it's very exhausting, and you're there on weekends and things like that. So initially for those 3 months, they kind of have only the 20 of you together. So it's kind of nice. Like you start off with a bunch of new people who are also new and who want to make friends. So it's great. So yeah, for the most part, you interact with them, you make your groups of friends, or you find people so you're comfortable with at least a smaller group of people. And then so once it gets to the fall quarter, because you start in summer quarter, right? So you start in the fall quarter, you have like a half and half. So you're still continuing some of the courses that you're doing in part of your boot camp, but at the same time you integrate it into a couple of their courses as well. So they kind of like ease you into it. They also like, I don't want to say use the word force, but they kind of like minimally force you into integrating with them. For example, like they have assigned, when you're like kids, you have like, oh, this is your partner and this is who you have to sit with in class. And like, well, you can't sit with your friend. And so you're kind of like forced to make friends with this partner that you're forced to sit with. It's like sort of like that, where they have like assigned lab seats for you and you're basically interspersed. Because now with the 21st are comfortable with each other, so they kind of intersperse you between all of these people. So you don't really have a choice. You have to, or they also kind of have to interact with you. I mean, that's how it goes. So yeah, I mean, it gets that way in terms of clinic, like you said, like they're so used to where things are in the clinic and how to work Axiom, if that's what you guys use as well. And like all of those things, and you're just completely lost. What they do is they kind of integrate you with the 4th year PPID advanced standing program. So you have like your buddy system. So that person essentially kind of like helps you through clinic.
Oh,
so like
that's good.
your first crown prep, you do it with that person. So it's like when I was a 4th year, I was required, it's a part of my requirement to graduate, to have a shared case with my 3rd year for like indirect, which is like a crown or on layer inlay, as well as like a direct. So I have to walk my baby 3rd year, or like my 4th year had to walk me through the whole thing. And all of my patients essentially becomes her or his patients. So I have to walk them through all of my patients, and I'll slowly start transferring, sorry about that. I'll slowly start transferring my patients, all the recalls to them when they're in 3rd year. And once they get to a point where I'm about to graduate, I'll start introducing some of my patients, because once I'm getting closer to getting down to my requirements, I'll start introducing my patients with them, get them to come and like assist me in some of the procedures that I'm doing. And that way, some of the more anxious patients that are like very comfortable with me and they kind of don't want to go to the next person, you kind of get them to come interact with them, get them integrated with them. And that's how they kind of learn the whole thing. I mean, yeah, of course, like I have asked like some of my traditional classmates, like, how do I work this and what's going wrong and stuff like that. But for the most part, it's easier to interact with someone who's also an advanced standing program, who's exactly where you were a year ago. So it's more relatable. But that's how you kind of integrate into the clinic. I mean, it is a struggle, like you said. It is like you do feel left behind, like to an extent, but then you will catch up. Like we're all here because we can adapt. So
yeah.
I'm gonna ask a very important question that has been like bugging me ever since the start of this call. So very often we tell people to be themselves in the interview, and that's something they really struggle with. They're like, I'm always myself. It's one of the most difficult things I can be in. And then they also, you mentioned that UCLA judges a person based on this kind of personality and their ability to see a fit or a vibe with that personality. Your personality, I mean, in the short time I've interacted with you, seems like an extremely vibrant person who's extremely comfortable
you're
with
nice,
themselves.
but anyway.
You're very comfortable. You don't seem to be, you look for the good aspects even in the struggle. You seem to be a person who's comfortable asking for help when you need it. And you're generally confident about whatever you're doing, even if that's something you know or something you do not know. This may be, this may be something which is not true, or you never know, but in the short time I have interacted with, that's the kind of vibe I got. To just help people out there who are looking for their, sense of direction, whether this is the right school for them, or whether the school would choose somebody of their personality, or whether they're even like, let's say, struggling to cultivate a personality that could impress UCLA. What would be your advice? If you could break down this personality of UCLA, what would that look like?
I honestly can't break down the personality of UCLA because they don't tell me what, like, I don't know what part of me they like, or what part of my, my best friend that they like. My roommate became my best friend. Like, I don't know what part of her they like, but we're very similar in terms of our personality. But there are also people who are so different from me, like polar opposite of who I am, but they're in the same program. I don't really know what they look for. But I feel like in general, what is appreciated by most programs is, of course, being confident. But I feel like at some point, you tend to overcompensate that confidence because of anxiety and because of being afraid that this cycle is not going to work out for you. So it kind of comes across as a little bit overconfident, and you might your attempt might be to tell the interviewer that you are actually a good candidate by telling them that I have XYZ experience, right? But at the same time, while putting that out, because of all of this anxiety and all of this nervousness of like, oh my God, am I going to get into this program? It kind of comes across as a little bit of a boasting, overconfident personality, which is nobody's intention to do that. But it's like a compensatory mechanism that your body or your like face does, and then that comes across in a way where this person thinks that they know everything, that they have all this experience and they're amazing at what they do. So why would we admit them to our school if they're already so great? Mm-hmm. And also gives them this idea that you are not going to be receptive to the critiques that they are going to give you, to the way that they want to kind of improve your clinical skills or your patient interaction skills or whatever, like not open to criticism, basically. So, but that's nobody's intention. Everyone wants to get into these programs because they want to be critiqued and to get better. But because of all of these like weird emotions that you go through the whole process, it could come across that way. So I feel like fundamentally, like there's a like very thin like line where you can be confident and like overconfident. So kind of like match that confidence with being humble, because we're all here because we're not good enough. We're all here because we want to learn. And the day you think that you are great at what you do is the day you'll stop learning. So like I don't, it's also kind of bad where you're overly self-critical of yourself. That's the kind of person I am. It's not healthy to be that way, but at the same time, it's not healthy to be that way. But at the same time, like trying to always understand that there'll never be a day where you know everything. That every day you are learning something new, and if you can find a way to learn one small thing new every day, you will keep growing. But the day you think, you know, I know everything, I'm amazing at what I do, I'm the best, you're not going to grow. So that I think that's kind of what they look for, where you're just like, you're confident that you are a decent human with decent skills and a, you know, decent resume, but at the same time you're humble enough to accept criticism. And you have to also show, the third thing that I think they really enjoy is that your enthusiasm to learn. Nobody wants to teach someone who is just like, I don't want to teach someone who's just like, okay, cool. Like, I want to teach someone who's like excited, who comes and like says, you know what, I want to learn this and I want to learn that. What do you think about this? What do you think? Then it kind of promotes even somebody who doesn't enjoy teaching or doesn't enjoy like educating other people, who's like bored, who's been teaching for 10 years, want to actually teach because you're enthusiastic. So I feel like all of these things are like nice, even if you don't have it. It's always nice to cultivate these things because they're always like positive characteristic traits that it's always an asset to you. So yeah, I mean, like I don't know, I just feel like being humble is just always pleasant, you know. It's just, you don't want to be talking to someone who thinks that they're better than you constantly. It's just annoying. I think it's annoying. So yeah.
That's it. Now I know why that you got into a school with just like third interview, because I know that talking to some of the admissions people in like different schools, one of the things that they tell is there is people who come in and we ask them, why do you think we should pick you? And they go like, yeah, because I'm the best.
Oh.
And they're like,
good. I'm so
okay.
glad that they're so confident about themselves. I don't think I could ever be like, yeah, because I'm the best. Like that would make me cringe.
I mean, yeah, confidence is one thing, but arrogance is a whole other thing. So yeah. I guess
there's also like what Aishwarya mentioned, the fear of covering up your pitfalls. Yeah. And like I think she put it beautifully. There is some strength in being vulnerable, and you know, actually admitting that vulnerability makes you a strong candidate. Yeah, it was an amazing.
Yeah, some people, like she said, become very arrogant to overcompensate for that, but there are also some people who become extremely like
themselves.
No, like I've seen people who are like shivering and like I've seen people who are like they're amazing people, but it doesn't come out on the interview because they're so nervous, because they just become like I don't know, they just become weird and they freeze and they don't know what they're saying. And then they say crap. It happened to me. Like my interview went wonderfully. Okay, I had a great interview. It's like a really funny story. I promise you, once I finished the interview, I called my best friend and was like, I'm not getting in. Like, it's not happening. So I finished my interview. This is a funny story, just to like take off the edge. So I like finished my interview. It was great. It went off well, whatever, right? And so when I was leaving, there were 3 faculty members. There was an older professor, and there was like a pros professor and the program director of UCLA. So the older professor was the one who opened the door and like greeted me into the room. And so he was the one who opened the door to say, hey, thanks for coming. It was great meeting you, blah, blah, blah. And so the program director looked at me and he's like, so what's your plan? So what did I do after that? No, after I finished my UCLA interview, I was going back to New York to do, I was doing this externship there. So I went back to New York, and it was me and my best friend who were staying together in New York. But I was so nervous. And he's like, because I was done with like keeping myself together. I was like, okay, I'm done now. All this like nervousness is coming out. And so I walk out, and then he looks at me, he's like, oh, Aishwarya, like, what's your plan now? Like, are you planning to go home to your parents? And I don't know what happened to me. And I turned to him and I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to go home back to, he's like, are you going back to Dubai? And I was like, yeah, I'm going to go back home to Dubai because I miss my mommy. I walked in and I was like, did I just say mommy? Like, a grown-ass woman who said this. And I was like, this is so bad. It was so bad. And I was like, you know, it gets the best of you, even though you're trying to be composed the whole time. Like, I'm the kind of person who says, like, if I'm very nervous, I'll say something silly. Like, there was this professor at UCLA that I, like, really looked up to and stuff like that. And, like, the first time I met him, I was like, it was, like, 11 a.m. And I was like, good night, Mr. Dr. blah, blah, blah. And I was like, what did I just say? Like, what's wrong with me? I always say the wrong things when I'm, like, nervous. So it happens. So some people, like you said, get very arrogant. Some people just say dumb things like I do sometimes, or some people just get very, like, they have no confidence, and then they just come across as a very dull personality, which is probably not their, you know, innate personality. But you know.
That's a very interesting way to put it, because we come across candidates, and in their first, you know, talk with us, they just like, they're so nervous, they're you know, they're so stiff, they don't move their hands, they just like. But the second session where they get comfortable with us, they're more, you know, happy, they start talking, they're more relaxed. So we always tell them, like, try to be this person that you're in the second call where, you know, you're not that nervous. But I guess it just comes off, you know, it's that interview that you've been waiting for, like, all your life, and you're just like, oh, this is it, I'm just going to get in and do all these things. And then, yeah, anxiety just happens. So
it's very high stakes.
That's interesting.
It's very, very, very high stakes.
It is.
I'm sure you know. So it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone gets better after CU, I think.
That's true.
After the CU interview, everyone gets better. They become manage it easier.
Yeah, but it's hard because, you know, you get to meet those few people that one time, and you have those 20 minutes to impress them. I think it's very hard. Like,
it is.
Have to do that. So that's why, like, I say just be yourself. Like, don't try to pretend to be anybody else, because when you're nervous and you try to pretend to be somebody else, like you try to be someone you want to be, it kind of comes across not the way you planned it to. So
awesome. We'll ask like maybe one last question. So we don't keep you waiting in
no, it's fine. It's totally fine. Like, I'm off tomorrow, so I'm like super excited.
Oh, good.
Oh, no. Okay.
It's really weird. It's a Monday, but I'm like so excited that I'm off. Like, it's fine. Yeah.
Happens in healthcare. Well, okay. So let's say you are speaking to someone who's currently in their last year of BDS. Maybe you're speaking to Aishwarya in the final year of BDS.
Yeah.
What would you tell her? Like, what would be the 3 things you tell her if her dream is to come to UCLA someday?
Oh, okay. Oof, that's like a... I'm the funny thing is, I'm like a planner, but I'm also someone who tries to plan the future. But if things go like GPR, didn't plan on doing it. Applied last minute, applied to 5 programs in New York only. interviewed at all 5, didn't like any of them, matched, ranked only one of them, didn't match that because they already told me that they have to sponsor my visa and I'm too expensive. Then I post-matched to 2 and then I picked one and just went on the whim, and I'm really happy with what I'm doing. So like, I'm not somebody who, like, I'll plan like a thing, but I won't be like, that's my dream school and I want it no matter what. And I feel like, I don't think anyone should have that kind of a perspective where they're like, oh, this is my dream school and I want to get into this school no matter what. It might be very different for people who have like a passport or a green card or anything like that. But even though I grew up in the Middle East, like, you cannot be an Arab unless you are ethnically Arab, and I'm clearly not, and brown. So I am Indian when it comes to the passport that I hold. And so at some level, it's like beggars can't be choosers. If like, I don't want to be discouraging, but like, none of these programs that have the advanced standing program are bad. All of them are great. They're all in good schools. None of them are unknown universities. They're all very famous universities. So any program that you get into, it will give you a better experience than what you had. And it will help you improve in ways that, I don't know how you felt, Nourah, but like, here now in GPR, yes, but like when I was in UCLA, not that many extractions and things like that. But when I was in India, I did like, I don't know, like 300 extractions in 2 years and stuff like that. But it's not the same here. So you do get experience in things that you did not get. But in terms of UCLA, I feel like if it's your like dream to come to UCLA, I don't even know what to tell you about that. Like, I just don't know what to tell you.
No,
Like,
I
don't know
agree.
do you have like a take on that? Like, am I just being difficult by not answering
No,
that?
you're not being difficult, but I agree with that. And that's what I try to tell a lot of students who ask me, when they have a choice, I usually tell them you're blessed to have a choice, because there are a lot of people out there who are trying to get into a school and they get into that one school and they're just like there. So I always tell them that, as you said, all the schools that provide the advanced study program are good. They're great schools. And, that's why they have that program, and they're able to get in more students with who are trained in an international country. So I always tell them that when you get into a school, choose that. I mean, of course, if you have a choice, then think about options and things like that. But when you don't wait for other interviews. I even tell students, like, if you get into a school and you have other interviews, let them know you can't make it, so that you give that opportunity to some other student who is probably on the wait list to get an interview. So for that question, like, I mean, maybe like people who have a family in LA and they don't want to move somewhere else, their only choice is to get into UCLA. Maybe you'll have to take a different approach and try to see what things
Probably,
can
but I
get you.
think, yeah, I agree with that completely. Like, if you have a choice, then you kind of know, because you've been to those interviews, you can find people who are in that program, talk to them, ask them, and kind of figure out which one of them checks most of your, like, ticks most of your check boxes, versus like, if you don't have a choice, like you said, like, I denied my interviews that I got after I got into UCLA. I'm like, this is a pretty good school. Like, I'm not gonna, gamble this. This is stupid if I gamble it. But if you only have family in LA and you're tied down to LA and you have to get into either UCLA or not, or it's nothing. I think that's a very difficult approach to have in terms of getting into any PPID program. I think it's not fair to yourself, or it has to be very low stakes. It can't be like, oh, this is a make or break for me. Like for me, and probably you as well, or in you as well with engineering, it was like, hey, I need to get into this program, not this program, a program in any one of these universities, but we have only one. We don't have choices like you guys. But, we have to get into this program at any one of these universities, and that is my step into that, working in that country, correct? And so any one of these programs are going to give you a DDS, okay? And some people are like more experienced than I am. Like, I never worked. I went school to school. Now I'm again in school, like school. But so there are people who worked for like 5 years who have excellent experience, and it kind of boils down to just getting the degree for them because they're so confident with their clinical skills, which is fantastic. So for them, it's just like getting a DDS. But if you are like tied down to just UCLA, I think you need to not put that kind of pressure on yourself.
That's true.
about getting into a DDS program, because that's not fair to you. Because like MBBS students, right, when they apply for internal medicine in the US, like a residency program, they have like 500 programs to apply to, even if you're a foreigner. And so they choose 250 programs and they have to get into one. We have like, what, 30?
30. Yeah.
Like it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like,
And it's cut down in half when you don't have like a green card or a citizenship. So it's almost like you have like a handful of programs and then you're just trying to like pick into at least one of them. So I don't think that, choosing is the perfect strategy to do. I always say, apply for everything and then see where you get in and go from there. And for people who ask like, does this school give me enough clinical experience, or does this school, let me practice on more patients? I always tell them that DDS is just like BDS, where you're starting off with that undergrad stage where you're not going to get enough clinical experience to go out in the real world. I mean, if you've already, like you said, like there are people who have practiced back in their country, they're confident. I have a classmate who's 53 years old and he's an implantologist and an oral surgeon. I know. And he's just so confident that, faculty are scared to ask him any questions. So I'm just like, you're fine, so. Right? Yeah. So the school's going to give you a good amount of experience. But then if you feel like you want to learn more, you're still going to go ahead and do a fellowship or a residency, whatever suits you best, and then go from there. Getting into a dental school is your entry to start working as an American dentist and get certified as that. So when these programs are good in themselves, I want to tell all the students who are like watching to understand that, don't be so hard on yourself to like, I want to get into a West Coast school, or I want to get into this school. It's just not worth the effort is what I think.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with like having a dream, but your actual dream is to get into a DDS program, not to get into a particular school like that. If that's your dream, then you need to be open to do like I would go to Harvard if I got like a course in tea making, like I would do it. Like I would make the best tea in the world. I'd totally do it, right? But like if that's your goal, then you need to like think very differently. But if your goal is DDS, that should be your goal. I don't think like you said, like it's not about. But that being said, like interestingly enough, like you mentioned that getting into these programs will kind of not really help you go out there in the real world and actually practice and things like that. I do notice that with like, for example, like I can only speak for Pitt and UCLA because I'm here. And so I have interacted with some students here, and like, the amount of clinical experience is so low that they just don't feel confident. Some people just have inherent confidence, which is great. But they don't feel like, they do one crown on a mannequin and hopefully one on a patient. Like, you're not going to be okay outside. It's not going to happen. But that being said, at UCLA, a large amount of the class does go out into private practice and corporate practice, only because even though there is a certain number of requirements, you can also get very lucky with your patients. If you hustle enough or you get a good amount of patients, there are people who actually are okay to spend in LA. Like they are considered the middle population, and that they can't go to a private Beverly Hills practice to get like dentistry done, but they can afford UCLA money, which I still think is very expensive. Like a crown is like $800, which I think is like crazy. When you come from like India, where it's like 2 rupees, probably not. But you know what I mean? Like it's like crazy if I think about $800 for a crown. But it's great because we're dentists and we make money, la la. But people are willing to spend that. Versus like over here, most people get PFMs, and I probably prepped one PFM my whole time in LA. Like I only did like zirconia crowns, like Emax crowns, like that. So people are willing to spend. So you do get a lot of clinical experience. So there are people who are very comfortable going out into private practice. I didn't do it because I wanted to do GPR. I wanted to do hospital dentistry. I wanted to like treat very medically compromised patients and get cancer patients and stuff like that. So I kind of wanted to have a broad range of the kind of patients I accepted. And that's probably one of the bigger reasons that I am doing GPR, also to increase speed. Like I just need to prep a crown in like 5 minutes, not 45 minutes. So that's probably the other reason. But yeah, like you said, I think it would be great if everyone does a GPR program, but it's
yeah.
All right. Awesome. This has been I think we've exhausted. They throw 1 hour of grueling questions. You should let her go now. Thank you so much, Aishwarya. I feel very energetic. listening
Aw.
to you speak for this long, especially after a 12-hour shift. So really appreciate
no,
the effort, and
of
I'm
course.
sure there'll be so many more people who will benefit from this.
Yeah,
Oh,
this was an
yeah.
amazing session. So thank you so much for giving us your time and your energy.
Oh, of course. No. I'm really happy to help because I know how hard it was. I don't know how your experience was, but like I know how hard it was for me to not have like a lot of people give me honest advice and like a lot of like, hey, you're not gonna get in, like you
Yeah.
have to do 5 years. Or you don't have research experience, try harder. Like no, like I didn't really get a lot of like useful advice, so I'm always happy to help.
Awesome.
Awesome.
All right.